Good evening, everyone. In our last session, we explored the mechanics of self-regulation, the feedback loops that help us close the gap between who we are and who we want to be, and the two distinct motivational systems that drive our pursuit of goals. Tonight, we go deeper. We will examine the psychological components that make effective self-regulation possible in the first place, and we will confront one of the most influential and debated ideas in modern psychology. That willpower is a limited resource, a muscle that tires with use. This is the hidden architecture of self-control. It involves specific cognitive abilities, particular brain regions, and a surprising vulnerability to depletion. Understanding it can change not only how you manage your own behavior, but how you judge the struggles of others. Part 1: 4 Capacities that support social self-regulation. The psychologist Todd Hatherton described 4 psychological capacities that help people regulate their behavior in social life: self-awareness, theory of mind, threat detection, and self-regulation. Together, they help us notice when our behavior may be misaligned with social expectations, understand how others may experience us, recognize possible relational risks, and choose a constructive response. Let me walk you through them. The first is simple but profound: awareness of our own actions. Before we can change a behavior, we must notice we are doing it. Marcus is a passionate conversationalist, but he has a tendency to talk over people without realizing it. During a team meeting, his colleague begins to share an idea, and Marcus jumps in mid-sentence to expand on it. This time, however, he catches himself. He notices his own interruption, the words leaving his mouth before his colleague had finished, and he also notices the brief flicker of frustration on her face. His self-awareness, a skill he has been working on in therapy, kicks in. He stops, apologizes, and says, "Sorry, I cut you off. Please finish." By monitoring his own actions, he was able to regulate his conversational behavior in real time, preserving the relationship and creating space for his colleague to contribute. Without that moment of awareness, he would have steamrolled the conversation and damaged a collegial bond. The second capacity is theory of mind, the ability to understand that others have thoughts and feelings different from our own. This allows us to anticipate the impact of our actions and adjust accordingly. Elena is a project manager who has just learned that the company is canceling a project her team has worked on for 6 months. She is furious and disappointed herself, and her instinct is to immediately call an emergency meeting and deliver the bad news bluntly. But before she sends the calendar invite, she exercises theory of mind. She thinks, how will my team receive this? They have dedicated months of their lives to this work. Some of them passed up other opportunities for this project. They will feel crushed, perhaps angry. They might worry about their job security. She adjusts her approach. She schedules a meeting for the following morning instead of the end of the day so people don't go home upset with no support. She prepares her words carefully, acknowledging their effort before delivering the bad news. Her ability to imagine their internal states transforms a potentially devastating announcement into a moment where the team still feels seen and respected, even in disappointment. The third capacity is detecting possible social threats. This is not paranoia, it is a sensitivity to subtle shifts in relationships that, if ignored, can fester. David realizes over the course of a week that his wife, Amara, seems different. She is not initiating physical touch as often, and when he kisses her goodbye in the morning, she seems distracted rather than present. These are subtle signals, and they are open to more than one interpretation. David notices them as possible signs of relational distance, but he does not assume that Amara is rejecting him or that he has done something wrong. He chooses a calm moment and says, "I've noticed you've seemed a little distant this week. I'm not sure if it's something I did or if you're just going through something. I'm here if you want to talk." Amara tears up and admits she has been feeling overwhelmed with a work problem and didn't want to burden him. The conversation deepens their connection. David's willingness to notice a possible change in connection, while remaining open to being mistaken, allowed him to raise the issue gently before resentment or misunderstanding could grow. The lesson is not that every shift in another person's behavior signals rejection. Effective social regulation involves noticing cues, tolerating uncertainty, and asking respectful questions rather than jumping to conclusions. The fourth capacity is self-regulation itself, the ability to override immediate impulses in order to maintain relationships and act in line with our deeper values. Two best friends, Safia and Noor, had a bitter argument 3 months ago and haven't spoken since. Safia misses Noor deeply, but every time she thinks about reaching out, she feels a surge of defensive anger. Why should I be the one to call? She said hurtful things too. Her impulse is to wait for Noor to apologize first, to protect her own pride. But after 3 months, she recognizes that this impulse is costing her a treasured relationship. She exercises self-regulation, overriding the urge to stay stubborn and self-righteous. She sends Noor a message. I miss you. I'm sorry for my part in our fight. I'd really like to talk if you're open. Noor replies within minutes, admitting she has been wanting to reach out too. They meet for coffee and slowly begin to repair the friendship. Safia's ability to control the impulse to cling to pride and instead initiate repair was essential to restoring the bond that mattered more than being right. These 4 capacities, self-awareness, theory of mind, threat detection, and self-regulation, support our ability to manage behavior in relationships and groups. They work together. A difficulty in one area can make it harder to respond effectively in another. Part 2: The brain beneath self-regulation. Neuroscience has begun to identify brain networks that contribute to these capacities, but we should avoid imagining that any one psychological skill lives in a single brain location. Self-reflection, understanding other people, detecting possible social threats, and controlling impulses depend on overlapping systems that work together. Prefrontal brain regions are especially important for reflecting on ourselves, considering other people's perspectives, maintaining goals, and choosing a response rather than simply reacting. Different parts of the prefrontal cortex contribute in different ways, and the evidence does not support reducing self-awareness or theory of mind to one single seat in the brain. Threat detection involves systems that include the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex. These systems can help us notice emotionally important or potentially threatening social cues. But their exact roles are complex, and activity in these regions cannot tell us with certainty what a person is feeling or interpreting in an everyday interaction. Return to David and Amara. David may experience an uneasy sense that something has changed in their connection. That feeling can prompt attention, but it is not proof that a threat exists. His more reflective capacities allow him to pause, consider alternative explanations, imagine Amara's perspective, and ask a caring question rather than making an accusation. Self-regulation, then, is not a contest between an emotional brain and a rational brain. It is a coordinated process. We notice what matters, interpret it in context, and decide how to act. Part 3: Willpower under debate. Now we come to one of the most influential and debated ideas in the psychology of self-control, the strength model of self-regulation, associated with Roy Baumeister and his colleagues. Its central metaphor is that willpower resembles a muscle. Effortful self-control in one situation may make later self-control more difficult, at least temporarily. This proposal became known as ego depletion. It was highly influential, but it is now debated. Some studies have reported that prior self-control impairs later persistence or restraint, while large replication efforts and bias-adjusted analyses have raised serious doubts about how reliable in general the effect is. The classic demonstration is the cookie and radish experiment. Participants were brought into a room filled with the aroma of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. On a table were 2 plates, one with the cookies and one with radishes. Some participants were asked to eat only the radishes, resisting the cookies. Others were allowed to eat the cookies freely. Afterwards, both groups were given an impossible puzzle to solve. In the original report, participants instructed to resist the cookies and eat radishes persisted for less time on the subsequent puzzle than those allowed to eat cookies. The researchers interpreted this as evidence that resisting temptation had impaired later persistence. However, this classic result should be presented as historically important rather than conclusive. Later replication research has questioned whether this pattern appears reliably across settings and tasks. Despite these debates, the experience of feeling drained after sustained self-control is real and widely shared. Consider Elena, a marketing executive who has been strictly following a challenging diet. All day, she has exerted significant self-control. She resisted the pastries at the morning meeting, ordered a plain salad while colleagues ate pizza, and refused the birthday cake in the afternoon. By the time she gets home, she is mentally tired and less patient than usual. That experience is real, but it does not by itself prove that she has used up a single finite biological reserve of willpower. Stress, hunger, fatigue, mood, task meaning, and the demands of the situation may all influence how she responds. When her partner makes an innocuous comment about the dishes, Elena snaps. Later, she procrastinates and pours a large glass of wine. The demanding day made self-regulation harder, but the explanation may be more complex than a simple depletion. The phenomenon crosses domains in everyday life. Raj is known for being patient and diplomatic. One week, he is put on a strict budget after an unexpected expense and must constantly suppress the desire to buy small luxuries. Constantly monitoring spending may leave Raj preoccupied, stressed, or frustrated. By the end of the week, he may be more vulnerable to reacting irritably to a coworker, not necessarily because a general reservoir of willpower has been drained, but because sustained pressure can narrow attention and reduce patience. Amara, a competitive swimmer, is in the middle of a high-volume training block. Every morning, she forces herself through exhausting workouts, resisting the impulse to cut corners or skip laps. The demanding training block leaves Amara physically tired and mentally taxed. In the afternoon, studying may feel especially difficult, and online shopping or social media may become more appealing. This could reflect fatigue, competing rewards, reduced motivation, or insufficient recovery, rather than a proven cross-domain depletion of willpower. The good news is that recovery matters. After a full night of sleep, Elena wakes up feeling more refreshed and emotionally steady. She apologizes to her partner and handles a stressful phone call later that day with greater composure. We do not need to assume that sleep refills a literal reservoir of willpower to recognize its value. Sleep can improve mood, attention, emotional control, and the ability to persist with difficult tasks, capacities that make self-regulation easier. Repeated practice can also make self-regulation easier over time, but the most reliable explanation may be the development of habits, skills, routines, and environments that reduce the need for constant effort. David, a chronic procrastinator, commits to studying at the same time every day, even when he doesn't want to. For the first few weeks, it takes enormous effort. He resists the urge to get up, scroll his phone, or end his session early. By the end of the semester, studying has become easier because David has established a regular cue, a predictable time, and a routine. He may also feel more confident in his ability to follow through on commitments. He may find that this new routine helps other parts of his life, but we should be cautious about claiming that practice in one domain automatically strengthens a general self-control muscle across all domains. Habit formation, clearer goals, and better systems often provide a more grounded explanation. It is tempting to think of self-control as running directly on sugar, but the evidence does not support a simple glucose as willpower fuel model. Reviews and meta-analyses have found little support for the idea that exerting self-control reliably lowers glucose in a way that causes later failures of self-control, or that consuming glucose reliably restores it. Part 4. A note of caution. But here we must pause. Science is not a collection of settled truths, it is a process of continual testing and revision. The ego depletion effect was once treated as robust evidence that self-control draws on a single, limited resource. Yet large-scale pre-registered replication work and later meta-analytic debates have raised substantial doubts about the size, reliability, and generality of that effect. This does not mean that mental fatigue is imaginary. People can feel worn down after sustained restraint, conflict, concentration, stress, or poor sleep. But the best explanation may differ from one situation to another. Motivation, incentives, beliefs about willpower, task meaning, habits, stress, and available recovery may shape performance as much as or more than a single depleted resource. Consider Rosa. She has been managing a toddler's tantrums all morning, suppressing her own frustration and exhaustion. The depletion theory would predict she should be highly susceptible to later self-control failures. However, when her older child comes home upset about a problem at school, Rosa listens with perfect empathy and patience. She does not snap or withdraw. The expected cross-domain impairment simply does not happen, echoing the findings of studies that fail to replicate the ego depletion phenomenon. What we take with us. The psychological components of self-regulation, awareness, theory of mind, social threat detection, and self-regulation itself are well established and deeply practical. They can be cultivated. You can train yourself to notice your own behavior, to consider the mental states of others, to detect the early warning signs of relationship strain without jumping to conclusions, and to override the impulses that damage connection. These are skills, and like any skills, they improve with practice. The strength model, while contested, remains a useful prompt to think about the conditions under which self-control becomes harder. Feeling mentally drained after a demanding day is real and widely shared, even if it is not best explained by a literal, finite willpower resource. The practical wisdom is still valuable. Rest matters, adequate food, hydration, and health matter, stress management matters, and repeated practice can help us build habits and skills. But none of these should be reduced to the idea that sugar refills willpower or that every difficult day has emptied a single internal tank. Whether or not willpower is best understood as a muscle, self-regulation is dynamic and context-sensitive. We can improve it through habits, planning, practice, recovery, and supportive environments, and we can respond with self-compassion on the days when it is harder to do what we intended. Thank you.